Rain lashed against the crumbling porch as a little girl sat huddled in the shadows, her knees drawn to her chest. Her name was Lila, though no one had spoken it in days. She was weak, her ankles swollen from a fall, and her thin shoulders trembled beneath a threadbare coat. In her hands she clutched a faded photograph, her mother's smile captured forever in sunlit warmth. It was the only thing she had left, the only proof that love had once lived in the house now marked for sale. The for sale sign outside the gate creaked in the wind, each swing like a cruel countdown. Lila pressed the photograph to her lips. "Please don't sell my house," she whispered to the storm. "It's all I have left of Mom." A distant rumble of thunder carried another sound, boots on gravel. At first, she thought it was just the storm playing tricks until a figure emerged through the curtain of rain. A soldier, tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform darkened by water. Beside him trotted a German shepherd, ears pricked, eyes alert, tail swaying with disciplined control. The dog brushed close to the soldier's leg, never straying far, every step a silent echo of loyalty. The soldier stopped when he saw the girl, lowering his weapon carefully, as though not to frighten her. The shepherd's gaze softened, and with a small chuff, he lay down on the wet ground as if to say, "We're safe. You're safe. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." The soldier crouched, the rain dripping from his cap. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. "Name's Daniel. This here is Ranger." He gave the shepherd a fond pat, and the dog's tail thumped once against the mud. Lila didn't answer at first. Her fingers tightened around the photograph, eyes darting toward the sign by the gate. "They're gonna sell it?" she croaked. "They're taking everything." Daniel exchanged a look with Ranger, as if silently weighing the girl's words. The shepherd whined softly, inching closer until his nose touched the edge of her coat. She startled, but didn't pull away. Instead, her small hand slipped out, brushing the dog's wet fur, and for the first time that night, the ice in her eyes began to thaw. Daniel eased down to sit on the step beside her, lowering himself so their eyes met. "Sometimes life tries to take what matters most," he said. "But sometimes it sends someone to help you hold on." A sudden gust rattled the shutters. The storm was worsening, and Daniel's instincts sharpened. His training told him to move, to get the girl to safety. But another voice, quieter and deeper, urged patience. This wasn't just about shelter from rain. It was about the home, the memory, the pain etched into a child's heart. Lila leaned, her head against Ranger, her body trembling. The shepherd didn't move, steady as stone, letting her lean all her weight. Daniel watched them, realizing the girl had found trust in the dog before she could trust a man. He didn't mind. In fact, it seemed right. Sometimes the purest comfort came from the wordless loyalty of a friend. "Do you live here alone?" Daniel asked, his tone calm, almost conversational. Lila nodded. "Daddy's gone. Mom's with God." Her voice cracked. She lifted the photograph just enough for him to see, then clutched it tight again. "They said the bank will take the house." "I tried to hide, but they'll find me." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen ruins of war, children hiding in bombed-out buildings, clutching keepsakes like shields against the world. But seeing it here, in his own country, in the quiet corner of a forgotten neighborhood, it struck a deeper chord. "Not while we're here," he said firmly. His hand brushed Ranger's head, and the dog sat taller, as though understanding the promise. The storm crashed louder, and in the distance a car engine revved, tires crunching against gravel. Daniel's muscles tensed instantly. Ranger rose, hackles lifting, a low growl humming in his chest. Lila shrank back, clutching her photograph. Her whisper barely rose above the storm, but it pierced Daniel's heart with a clarity sharper than any bullet. "Please, don't send me back." Headlights cut through the sheets of rain, sweeping across the old porch like twin blades. Lila stiffened, her breath catching as the glow pinned her in its path. Ranger moved in front of her instinctively, his body forming a living shield, muscles taut, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Daniel's hand shifted to the holster at his side. He didn't draw yet, but his posture sharpened, alert, ready. The soldier in him had learned to read intent before words were ever spoken. The car door slammed open. A man stepped out holding an umbrella that looked far too polished for the weather-beaten neighborhood. His suit was damp at the edges, but his shoes gleamed black, even in the storm. "Well, well," the man called over the rain, voice slick and sharp. "The little squatter." His eyes narrowed at Lila, then slid toward Daniel. "And who are you? Some kind of rescuer? This isn't your business, soldier boy." Lila shrank back behind Ranger, her voice trembling. "That's Mr. Collins. He says the house isn't mine anymore." Daniel kept his gaze steady, his voice calm but edged with steel. "She's a child, not a squatter. And this house was her home," Collins sneered, snapping his umbrella shut. "Her parents left debt, not deeds. The bank gave me rights to clear the property. By tomorrow this place is gone. I don't care if she clings to it with her fingernails. It's mine to sell." Ranger barked once, sharp and commanding. The man flinched back half a step, then scowled. Daniel stood, his frame casting a shadow in the headlights. "You'll wait until the storm passes." "And you'll treat her with respect?" Collins laughed, though it wavered under the shepherd's growl. "Respect? The world doesn't give children respect. It gives them consequences." His gaze flicked to the sign by the gate. "This house will be mine, one way or another." With that he turned and retreated to his car, slamming the door. The engine roared, wheels spitting gravel as the vehicle sped away into the dark. For a moment, only the storm remained. Then Lila's small sob broke through. She clutched the photograph tighter, pressing it against her chest as if the picture alone could keep the walls standing. Daniel crouched beside her again. Ranger pressed against her side, licking the tears from her cheek. "Hey," Daniel said softly. "He's gone. For now, but he'll come back," Lila whispered. "He always does. With papers, with locks, with people who yell. I tried hiding in the attic, but—" She broke off, burying her face in Ranger's fur. Daniel felt something shift deep inside him. He'd seen this look before, in villages overseas where families had lost everything. But here, in front of a little girl who hadn't asked for battles or banks or betrayals, it burned differently. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "You've got me." And Ranger. The dog gave a soft huff, as if seconding the oath. Still, Daniel knew this wasn't a problem fists or weapons could solve. This was legal ground, ink and signatures. He'd have to find another way, a way to honor the girl's plea without breaking the law. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, he had to keep her safe. "Come on," he said, offering a hand. "Let's get inside before the storm brings the roof down." Reluctantly, Lila rose. Her limp slowed her steps, and Daniel noticed the swelling at her ankle. Without asking, he scooped her into his arms. She gasped, startled, then clung to his jacket, burying her face in his shoulder. Ranger padded close, never leaving her side. Inside, the house smelled of dust and memories. The furniture was sparse, covered with sheets, but photographs lined the mantel, faded by time. Daniel set Lila gently on the couch, then crouched to examine her ankle. "Twisted," he murmured. "Needs wrapping, but no break." Lila sniffled, watching him through wide eyes. "You sound like Mom," she said. She always knew what was wrong before the doctor. Daniel smiled faintly. "Mums have a way of knowing things." He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a strip of bandage. "Lucky for you, soldiers learn a thing or two about patching people up too." As he wrapped her ankle, Ranger rested his head on her knee, eyes half closed. The girl stroked the dog's ears, her breathing steadying at last. You trust him a lot, Daniel said, nodding at the shepherd. Lila gave a tiny nod. He doesn't lie. People lie, but dogs. They just love Daniel. Looked at her then, realizing how much weight those words carried for someone so young. He tightened the last knot and sat back. You're right. Dogs don't lie. That's why soldiers depend on them. A sudden crash echoed upstairs. Daniel froze. Ranger's ears shot up, his body shifting instantly from calm to combat ready. Lila clutched the photograph again, her voice a sharp whisper. They're here. The crash upstairs echoed like a gunshot through the empty house. Lila froze, her fingers digging into Ranger's fur. The shepherd stiffened, ears twitching toward the ceiling, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Daniel's body reacted before thought. He rose, silently, hand hovering near his sidearm, every muscle coiled. His eyes flicked to the staircase, shadowed, narrow, a perfect choke point. Whoever was up there had the advantage. Stay here, Daniel whispered. His voice carried a steady calm, the kind that came from years of facing storms bigger than himself. But Lila shook her head violently. No, don't leave me. Ranger pressed closer to her, as if to say he'd never allow harm near her again. Daniel knelt, his eyes level with hers. I need to know who's in this house. Ranger will stay with you. He'll protect you better than any wall. Trust him. Trust me. The girl's lip trembled, but she gave a tiny nod. Daniel's hand brushed Ranger's head. Guard. The shepherd immediately shifted, planting himself between the girl and the staircase, his stance a fortress of muscle and instinct. Drawing his weapon, Daniel crept up the stairs. The boards groaned beneath his boots, each step measured, controlled. The storm outside thundered, rattling the windows, masking softer sounds, except one, a shuffle, a thud, then silence. At the landing, Daniel paused. His eyes scanned the hallway. 3 doors, one ajar. He advanced, weapon raised, and nudged the door open with his shoulder. Inside, the room was stripped bare except for a toppled dresser. A loose shutter slammed against the window frame, explaining the earlier crash. He lowered his weapon slightly, exhaling. But then he heard it, a rustle from the corner. He pivoted fast. A raccoon, drenched and trembling, darted from beneath the dresser, its eyes glowing in the dim light. It hissed once before scrambling out through the broken shutter into the storm. Daniel let out a slow breath, the tension releasing from his shoulders. False alarm. But his instincts stayed sharp. Sometimes false alarms tested readiness as much as real ones. He reholstered his weapon and headed back downstairs. Lila's wide eyes met his the moment he appeared. Was it him? She whispered. No, Daniel said gently. Just nature looking for shelter. Nothing that can hurt you? Ranger wagged his tail once, confirming the verdict. He stepped forward, sniffing Daniel as if double-checking his safety. Still, Lila wasn't convinced. Her gaze darted to the windows, the shadows, the storm. He'll come back, she muttered. Not just the man in the car. Others, people who don't care. People who take. Daniel crouched again, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Maybe. But you won't face them alone. Do you hear me? Her eyes filled with tears. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Daniel hesitated. The question cut deeper than she realized. Why did he care? Maybe because once, long ago, he had been the one left behind, clutching a keepsake no one else valued. Or maybe because war had shown him too many children who didn't get a chance at safety. Because someone cared enough to stand for me once, he said finally. And it changed everything. Lila's gaze softened, though doubt still shadowed it. She hugged her photograph tighter. The storm raged on, lightning illuminating the room in jagged flashes. Daniel found a blanket folded in the corner and draped it around her shoulders. Ranger curled beside her, his steady breathing a lullaby against the chaos outside. For a moment, peace settled. But Daniel's mind didn't rest. Collins's words haunted him. By tomorrow this place is gone. That meant the man wasn't bluffing. He'd be back, maybe not alone. And Daniel needed a plan. He stepped aside, pulling out his phone. Service was spotty, but he managed to bring up a number, an old friend from his unit who now worked in legal aid for veterans. If anyone could help him navigate the mess of debt, deeds and foreclosure, it was Marcus. The call didn't connect. No bars. He cursed under his breath. Tomorrow, then. For now, he turned back to the girl. She had dozed off against Ranger, the photograph still clutched in her hand. Even in sleep, her brow furrowed, as though nightmares lurked close. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, keeping watch. Hours passed in the rhythm of rain and wind. Ranger's eyes blinked open now and then, checking him, checking the girl, before drifting shut again. Just before dawn, a faint crunch echoed outside, the sound of tires on wet gravel. Daniel's pulse spiked. He rose silently, moving to the window. Headlights again, but this time no polished sedan. A battered pickup, its muffler rattling, rolled up the drive. Two men climbed out, their jackets hooded, their movements purposeful. One carried a crowbar, the other a chain. Daniel's jaw tightened. These weren't bank officials, these were hired hands. He reached down, touching Ranger's collar. The shepherd stood instantly, teeth bared, a growl rolling like thunder. Behind them, Lila stirred, half awake, her voice a broken whisper. "Don't let them take it." The battered pickup idled like a growl in the throat of the storm's fading echo. Dawn had not yet broken. The sky was a pale bruise, the kind of light that made everything seem colder than it was. Danielle slid 2 fingers to Ranger's collar. The shepherd stood, muscles coiled, eyes molten with focus. "Lila," Daniel said softly, never taking his gaze off the window. "I need you behind the couch. Stay low, hand on Ranger's tag if you get scared. He'll know." She pushed herself up, pain tightening her mouth when her wrapped ankle touched the floor. Ranger eased against her as she scooted behind the couch's arm. "He won't let them take it," she whispered, more to the dog than to Daniel. Outside, the men conferred by the tailgate. One, the heavier one with the crowbar, jabbed a thumb at the porch. The thinner man looped the chain around his fist like a promise. They didn't move like officials. They moved like people who expected no resistance. Daniel's thumb unlocked his phone. 1 bar blinked to 2. He hit 911 and spoke in clipped, clear phrases. "Potential illegal entry, minor present, address." The dispatcher's voice was thin under static, but he heard enough. A patrol unit would be sent. He slid the phone into his pocket, drew a slow breath, and opened the front door. Rain mist crept in, carrying the scent of wet earth and old wood. He stepped onto the porch, hands visible, posture straight. Ranger hovered in the doorway, a living gate, silent, ready. "Morning," Daniel called. "You're trespassing." The crowbar man smiled without mirth. "You the landlord?" "Former staff sergeant," Daniel said, "and the man between you and a felony." The thinner one yanked his hood back. "We're here to clear an abandoned property." "Got orders." "From who?" "Mr. Collins," the crowbar man said. "Owner." "Owner's a word that needs paperwork," Daniel replied. "Where is it?" The chain clanked as Hooded shrugged. "Back in town. We're not paper guys." "That's convenient." Daniel stepped down 1 stair, not closing the distance. "This house is occupied by a minor. You're done for the morning." The crowbar man tilted his head. "You got a badge says you can tell us that?" "No." Daniel's voice stayed calm, iron under velvet. "I've got a camera. 2 of them." He pointed to his phone, then to the porch eave where a cheap motion sensor blinked red. "And a call in to the sheriff. You leave now, you get to drink your coffee in peace. You stay, you get to explain why you broke into a kid's home while the county recorder office is closed." They hesitated. Ranger took 1 step forward and raised his head. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He just looked at them. The kind of look working dogs give when they measure distance, wind, intent. The chain loop loosened fractionally in the thinner man's hand. The crowbar man flicked a look at his partner. Collins said, "I don't care what he said," Daniel cut in, gentle as a blade. You walk away, you keep your days simple. Far down the street, a screen door creaked, then slammed. A neighbor in a robe and rubber boots, grey hair tucked under a plastic cap, stood on her porch, phone raised. "I'm filming too," she called. "And I know your faces." The thinner man swore under his breath. The heavier one clicked his tongue, a tiny sound of annoyance. "We'll be back with papers," he said. "I'll be here with the law," Daniel replied. They backed toward the truck, the crowbar swinging low, not quite a threat, more like a habit. The engine coughed, then caught. The truck rolled away, taillights smearing red in the mist. When they were gone, Daniel exhaled. His hands had stayed steady, but every nerve felt like piano wire. He closed the door and turned. Lila peered over the couch arm, cheeks ghost pale, hair a halo of damp tangles. "Are they gone?" "For now." He moved to her, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. "You did perfect." Ranger pushed his head under her hand. The girl clung to his ruff, pressing her face into the warm, living scent of dog and rain. The trembling in her shoulders eased by degrees. The neighbor's knock came a few minutes later, 3 brisk taps. Daniel glanced through the peephole before opening. The woman from down the street stood straighter up close, raincoat snapped high at the collar, posture that said she used to be in charge of something, a classroom, a choir, maybe a small army of grandchildren. "I'm Mrs. Alvarez," she announced, stepping over the threshold with a competence that made permission feel like an afterthought. "Used to teach 3rd grade, taught her mother, if I'm not mistaken." She looked at Lila, and the stern line of her mouth softened. "You look just like her." Lila folded into herself, thumb worrying the photograph's soft, frayed corner. "They want to sell it," she said. "They want to take Mum away again." Mrs. Alvarez's eyes flicked to Daniel, measuring, then nodded once, as though awarding a private grade. "You did right calling the sheriff. They can't remove a child without a court order, not with the schools and me 2 blocks away to witness it." She set a tote on the entry table and pulled out a thermos, 3 paper cups and a grocery sack that smelled of cinnamon. "You'll both think better after food." They ate in the front room, the 3 of them and the dog, steam curling from cups, the storm's hiss, now only a memory on the windows. Lila sipped cautiously, both hands around the cup, as if warming more than fingers. Ranger lay at her feet, chin on paws, eyes half closed, but always tracking. "I'm going to try my friend again," Daniel said, shifting his chair so he could step into the hallway. He found a spot by the door where 2 and then 3 bars flickered to life. He dialed. This time, Marcus picked up on the 2nd ring. "Tell me you're calling to say you finally bought a fishing license." "I have a situation," Daniel said, and laid it out. The foreclosure, the men, the kid, and the photograph, the absence of paper. He kept it tight, facts first. Marcus listened, and then swore in a way that sounded like affection for the human race and disgust for its institutions. "You need 3 things," Marcus said. "Proof of occupancy, proof of guardianship, or a temporary guardian petition, and a delay action. If her father isn't legally declared deceased or unfit, somebody's supposed to have custody of this kid. But if it's a mess, a veteran can petition for emergency temporary guardianship in this county if the child's in imminent danger. Buy time, also check the deed history. If Mum's name was still on it and she left a will, there might be protections the bank ignored." "Copy," Daniel said. "Text me the forms." A minute later, his phone pinged. He returned to the living room with a new kind of focus, the kinetic, quiet anger of a man who'd found the seam in the problem and intended to pry it open. "Lila," he said, kneeling by her chair, "do you know where your mum kept important papers?" "A box? A drawer?" She thought for a long moment, eyes distant in the way they go when memory walks to the edge and peeks over. "The attic," she said softly. "There's a trunk. Daddy called it the ship's chest. He said everything that matters floats." Mrs. Alvarez nodded, already rising. "I'll get the step stool." Ranger led the way to the narrow hall closet that held the attic ladder. Daniel pulled the cord, unfolding the stairs with a dry creak. Dust drifted, silver in the thin morning light. He glanced back at Lila. "You stay there. Shout if you need us." She hugged the photograph tighter and nodded. The attic smelled like cedar and old summers. Daniel's flashlight swept over suitcases, Christmas ornaments, a broken fan. In the corner, under a quilt that had once been red, a wooden chest sat with brass corners turned green with time. He dragged it into the light and pried it open. Inside, a folio of documents tied with a ribbon, a smaller box with a jewelry latch, a thick manila envelope scrawled with a single word in a woman's looping hand. "If." Daniel's breath hitched. He brought the bundle down like a relic from a sanctuary. Lila's eyes fixed on the envelope as if it moved on its own. "My mum's handwriting," she whispered. Daniel lay the documents on the coffee table. "We'll go slow." One at a time, they worked methodically. Birth certificates, tax receipts, a mortgage statement stamped paid, then another, later one, a refinance with an adjustable rate, a serpent of numbers that could choke anyone who thought they were standing on solid ground. Mrs. Alvarez's mouth thinned. "Predatory," she muttered. Then Daniel opened the envelope marked "If." Inside, a notary stamp caught the light, a will, dated 18 months ago. It named Lila's mother as sole owner of the property after a separation. It named Lila as heir. And at the bottom, a clause. "In the event of my death before my daughter reaches 18, I designate as temporary guardian." Daniel's eyes snagged on the name. He read it twice, 3 times, as if repetition could make a different outcome. He looked up at Lila with a softness that almost undid him. "It says your guardian is your father," he said, "if he can be found." The room held its breath. Rain ticked. Ranger lifted his head. "My dad left," Lila said quickly, defensively, like a reflex. He went to find work. He promised he'd send money, then nothing. People say he ran. Mrs. Alvarez touched the will with 2 careful fingers. This buys us time regardless. With this, the sheriff can't let a private party force a move." Daniel nodded, mind already moving. "And if your dad's not gone, we find him. We prove things before anyone lays a hand on this house." He reached for the jewelry box. Inside lay a silver cross on a thin chain, a church bulletin folded into a square, and a sealed envelope addressed in the same looping hand. "To Lila, if anything happens to me." The girl's mouth trembled. "Can you—" "It's yours," Daniel said, placing it in her hands. She broke the seal, careful even in her urgency. The letter inside smelled faintly of lavender. Lila read, lips shaping silent words until sound found her again. Mum says Daddy had to leave because of something at work. Not bad. Just he was in danger. She says if anything happened to her, I should find Father Miguel at St. Bridget's. He knows where to start. She says," her voice thinned to a thread, "she says not to lose the house because it's where the light is." Mrs. Alvarez pressed a hand to her mouth, blinking too fast. Ranger slid closer, resting his head on Lila's knee, as if to anchor the world. Daniel's phone buzzed with a new text, unit en route. ETA 4 minutes. Another ping followed from Marcus. "Call this recorder's office clerk, early riser. Owes me a favor." Hope, small and stubborn, bloomed in the room like a candle flame. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Gravel crunched again, not 1 engine, 3. A polished sedan, a boxy van with a logo for Collins Property Services, and a flatbed carrying a portable dumpster rolled to a stop in front of the gate. Men in bright vests climbed out with clipboards and bolt cutters. At their center, under a black umbrella held by someone else, walked Mr. Collins. Dry, smiling, certain. Daniel stood, the will in his hand like a standard. Ranger rose beside him, silent thunder. Lila clutched her mother's letter to her chest, eyes wide, a child holding a lighthouse in a storm. Collins stopped at the bottom step, looking up with theatre in his eyes. "Good morning," he purred. "I've brought papers." He tapped a folder. "And men to make this tidy." Behind him, one of the workers set the bolt cutters on the gate. Chain! The metal screamed as it snapped. Ranger's growl rolled from his chest, low and terrible, as Daniel stepped forward into the threshold, will raised, voice steady as a command at dawn. "Take one more step," he said, "and you'll learn what happens when a community and the law say no." The worker lifted his boot to the property line. And then, like a bell in a storm, the front door whispered behind Daniel, a child's voice threading the noise with a truth so fragile it was frightening. "Daddy's not dead." The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. Daddy's not dead. Even the rain seemed to pause. Collins's smirk faltered just for a second before snapping back into place. "Cute," he said, his voice slick, "but fairy tales don't change the law." Daniel didn't move. His hand tightened on the folder, the will a shield of ink and paper. Beside him, Ranger's growl deepened, chest vibrating like a drum of warning. Behind them, Lila stepped forward into the hall light, the photograph pressed against her chest. She was pale, trembling, but her voice, thin and frayed, carried farther than Daniel expected. "My mum said Father Miguel knows where to find him." She clutched the letter. "He didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because he had to. He's alive." Collins tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Or maybe Mommy spun a pretty story so her daughter wouldn't hate her husband for running off. "Either way, it doesn't matter. This house is property, not poetry." Mrs. Alvarez pushed her way to the front, planting herself like an oak tree. "Property has rules, Collins, and so do children. You lay one hand on this girl's home without the sheriff present, you'll answer to me, the school board, and every neighbor with a camera phone." As if on cue, two cruisers turned onto the street, red and blue lights scattering across wet pavement. Collins's umbrella wavered. The bolt cutter man froze mid-step, caught in the glow of law's arrival. Deputies climbed out, hands on belts but no guns drawn. The lead deputy, broad, grizzled, with the kind of eyes that had seen both kindness and cruelty, strode up. "What's going on here?" Collins snapped open his folder. "Foreclosure. Bank authorization. Removal of an unlawful occupant." Daniel stepped down one stair, raising the will. "And I have a notarized document that says otherwise. Plus a named guardian not yet contacted. You're looking at an active dispute, not an eviction." The deputy took the will, scanning it. His jaw set. He looked at Collins. "Until a judge sorts this, nobody touches this house. Nobody touches this kid." Collins's nostrils flared. "Sheriff's Department doesn't make property law." "No," the deputy said. "But we enforce child protection statutes, and until custody is clear, she's under our protection." He tipped his hat toward Daniel. "You the vet Marcus called me about?" Daniel blinked. Marcus worked fast. "Yes, sir." "Then file that guardianship paperwork today. I'll log the dispute. Collins, take your men and your dumpster and roll out before I fine you for illegal disposal." The property men muttered. The flatbed driver grumbled, already climbing back into his cab. Collins, though, didn't move. He stared at Lila, and his smile turned colder. "You've bought time," he said softly. "But you can't hold it forever. Banks bleed slow, soldier, and little girls grow tired." Daniel stepped off the porch, closing the gap. Ranger shadowed him, hackles raised, lips peeled back in a snarl, sharp as steel. The deputies shifted, not intervening, watching, weighing. Daniel's voice dropped to a soldier's register, calm and deadly clear. "Walk away, Collins, before you learn that loyalty and law together are heavier than greed." For the first time, Collins stepped back. His shoes splashed mud, his umbrella tilting. He turned, barking orders, and his caravan rolled away down the street. Silence fell, broken only by the drip of rain from the porch eaves. Lila exhaled a shaky breath and sagged against the doorframe. Ranger nudged her hand, as if to remind her she was still anchored. The deputy handed the will back to Daniel. "File it. And get that priest involved if the girl says he knows something. I'll keep Collins off you for 48 hours. After that, you'll need a judge." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." When the cruisers left, dawn finally broke through the clouds. The storm had passed, leaving the air sharp with the smell of wet earth and hope. Inside, Mrs. Alvarez fussed with breakfast she'd brought, Lila picking at sweetbread with one hand while the other never left Ranger's fur. Daniel sat at the table, documents spread before him like maps of a battlefield. "You meant what you said, didn't you?" Lila's voice was quiet. "About what?" Daniel asked. "About finding Daddy." Her eyes searched his face, wide and fragile. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "If he's alive, we'll find him. I promise. But until then, you've got me and Ranger. You're not alone anymore." The dog thumped his tail once, sealing the vow. Lila's fingers tightened on her mother's letter. She whispered, as if telling the room rather than anyone in particular, "Daddy's not dead. I'll wait." And for the first time in months, she believed it. The bell tower of St. Brigid's rose above the rooftops, its cross etched against a sky that was finally, mercifully, blue. The storm had passed, leaving puddles in the streets and a crisp clarity in the air. Daniel's truck, borrowed from Mrs. Alvarez's son, rumbled up the church drive. Lila sat in the passenger seat, clutching her mother's letter like a talisman. Ranger rode in the back, head out the window, ears flapping in the breeze, eyes alert even in peace. The church doors stood open. Sunlight slanted across pews polished by decades of folded hands. At the altar, a man in a simple cassock lit candles one by one. He was older, his hair silver, his posture strong. He turned at the sound of footsteps. "Father Miguel?" Daniel asked. The priest smiled faintly. "I am he. And you must be Lila." His gaze softened as he looked at her. "You are the image of your mother." At that, the girl's grip on the letter tightened. "She said you'd know where my dad is." "She said you'd help Father Miguel set the taper down." He came closer, kneeling so his eyes met Lila's. "Your mother was a woman of faith and courage. She told me long ago that if anything happened to her, her daughter must know the truth." Daniel's jaw flexed. "Truth about what?" The priest hesitated, weighing trust. Then his eyes flicked to Ranger, who had padded up the aisle to sit at Daniel's side. The dog's calm, steady presence seemed to tip the scale. "Her father never abandoned her," Father Miguel said. "He was forced to disappear." Lila's breath caught. "Forced? Why?" Father Miguel gestured for them to sit. In the front pew, the story spilled out like a confession. Her father, Gabriel, had worked for a shipping company in Leon, the same company that had been investigated for smuggling arms through freight. Gabriel discovered records, shipments hidden in crates marked as farm equipment. He confronted his employer, who warned him to keep silent. When Gabriel refused, threats came, first subtle, then direct. "One night," Father Miguel said, "he came to me, afraid for your safety. He said if he stayed, the men would hurt his family. He chose to disappear, to gather proof, to dismantle them from the shadows. He thought it would take months. It has taken years." Daniel frowned. "So where is he now?" The priest sighed. "I hear from him only through letters. Never return addresses. The last was 6 months ago. He was close to something," he said. "Close to ending it." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "So he's alive?" Father Miguel placed a hand over hers. "Yes, child. Alive and fighting for you." In his way, Daniel leaned back, mind racing. Smuggling, disappearance, a father fighting in the shadows while his daughter nearly lost her home. It was a war of a different kind, but the stakes were the same. "We need those letters," Daniel said. "Anything to prove he's alive. If Collins thinks the father's abandoned her, he'll press harder." The priest nodded, rising. From a locked drawer in the sacristy, he retrieved a small bundle of envelopes. "These are all I have." Daniel flipped through them quickly. Most were vague, careful not to expose locations, but one caught his eye, creased more, the ink smudged as if written in haste. "If anything happens, go to St. Bridget's. Father Miguel will know. The proof is nearly ready. Keep her safe." Daniel's throat tightened. He looked at Lila, who clutched her photograph with both hands now. "Proof?" she asked. "Yes," Father Miguel said. He meant documents, names, perhaps even recordings. "But where they are, I cannot say." The heavy doors slammed open. Sunlight flooded in, and with it, two men in suits, sharp and cold, their shoes too clean for the muddy street outside. Collins's men. "Well," the taller one drawled, "isn't this cozy?" Soldier, priest, and little girl telling ghost stories. Ranger was on his feet in an instant, standing between them and the pew. His growl rolled like thunder through sacred air. Daniel rose slowly, shielding Lila with his body. "Church isn't your jurisdiction." "Everything's Collins' jurisdiction now," the man sneered, "including the girl." The shorter one stepped forward, a folded paper in hand. "We've got temporary custody papers, signed by a judge." Collins pulled strings. "Effective immediately. The child comes with us." Lila gasped. "No!" She clung to Daniel's arm. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The document looked official, but so had every trap in war. His gut screamed wrong. Still, the law had weight, even when twisted. "Before you begin," the taller man said, smirking, "let's make this easy." "Hand her over," Ranger barked once, the sound echoing like a command. Daniel shifted his stance, hand hovering at his belt, not on his weapon, but close enough. "No," he said flatly, "not until I see the seal. Not until I verify." The taller man's smirk sharpened. "And if we don't wait?" Daniel's eyes burned steady. "Then you'll find out what happens when a soldier, a priest, and a shepherd stand their ground." Behind him, Lila's whisper shook the air like a prayer. "Please don't send me back." The church's stone walls seemed to hold their breath. The taller man dangled the folded papers like bait. "This is signed. Collins has custody now. Sheriff can't help you." Daniel didn't blink. "Funny thing about soldiers, we read terrain. That paper doesn't have a county seal. It's a copy, not a certified order, which makes it worthless." The shorter man's grin slipped. "We'll get the seal later. She's coming with us now." Ranger's growl deepened. His paws dug into the wooden floor, claws scraping grooves. The shepherd's amber eyes locked on the men, waiting for Daniel's command. Father Miguel stepped forward, his cassock flowing. "This is God's house," he said, voice iron wrapped in calm. "You will not desecrate it with lies." The taller man sneered. "God doesn't own mortgages." "Neither do thieves," Daniel shot back. The men moved in tandem, stepping closer. Lila shrank behind Daniel, clutching his jacket. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. "Please don't send me back." It was the kind of cry that pierced deeper than bullets. The priest flinched. Daniel's jaw tightened, and Ranger exploded forward. The shepherd lunged with precision, teeth snapping inches from the taller man's wrist. The paper dropped, fluttering to the ground. The man stumbled back, cursing. His partner reached for Lila's arm, but Daniel moved faster. A sharp pivot, a soldier's disarm. Daniel grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and shoved him back into the pew. The wood groaned under the impact. The taller man fumbled at his jacket, pulling something metallic. Pepper spray, not a gun, but dangerous enough. Ranger hit him square in the chest, knocking him flat. The can skittered across the stone floor. Father Miguel's voice thundered like a sermon. "Leave this sanctuary now!" The doors swung wide again. Deputies stormed in, guns holstered, but hands firm on batons. The sheriff himself strode forward, face red from urgency. "What's going on here?" Daniel pointed to the papers on the floor. "Forgery. Attempted kidnapping." The sheriff scooped them up, eyes scanning, his lip curled. "Judge's signature is a fake. I know his handwriting." Collins is digging himself deeper. The deputies hauled the two men up. One protested, sputtering. "We had orders!" "You had nothing," the sheriff snapped. "Collins can explain this in court." As they were dragged out, the taller one spat at Daniel's boots. "This isn't over." Daniel didn't flinch. "It is for today." Silence returned, heavy but holy. Ranger padded back to Lila, licking her hand as if erasing fear. The girl collapsed against the dog, sobbing into his fur. Daniel crouched beside her. "You did brave, kiddo. You stood your ground." She lifted her tear-streaked face. "They were going to take me." "Not while we're here," Daniel said, voice steady. "Not ever." The sheriff exhaled, running a hand over his brow. "Collins has money, connections. But this forgery? That'll buy us time. File those guardianship papers today. I'll testify to what I saw." Father Miguel laid a hand on Lila's shoulder. "Your father risked his life for truth. Now it is time we honor that by standing for you." Daniel nodded. "And by finding him?" He looked at the bundle of Gabriel's letters again, mind working like a map unfolding. There had to be a clue, a breadcrumb. Ranger nudged one envelope with his nose. Daniel picked it up. Smudged ink, a faint stamp, half torn away, Port of Houston. Daniel's pulse quickened. "He was here," he muttered. "Not across the world." Here, Lila's eyes widened. "You can find him?" Daniel looked at her, then at Ranger, then at Father Miguel. "We'll try. And until we do, we'll keep you safe." But before he could promise more, the church bells began to ring, not by hand, but triggered by someone pulling at the ropes in the tower. Everyone froze. Daniel's instincts surged. Ranger's ears shot up, his growl sharp and immediate. "Someone's in the tower," the priest whispered. Daniel stood, body taut. "Then Collins isn't finished." The bells clanged with frantic rhythm, not holy peals of worship, but the sharp, uneven clang of warning or of signal. Daniel's eyes snapped upward. "Stay with Father Miguel," he ordered, already moving toward the side stairwell. Ranger bolted at his side, claws clicking on stone. Lila grabbed at his sleeve as he passed. "Don't leave me." "I'll be back," Daniel said firmly, pressing her hand into Ranger's tag for an instant. "He'll protect you if I don't come down." Ranger barked once, as if to promise. The spiral staircase was narrow, each step groaning under Daniel's boots. He kept low, weapon holstered but hand ready. The bells above rattled, chains clinking like angry ghosts. Halfway up, he saw him, a man crouched by the ropes, yanking in jagged pulls. His jacket was black, unmarked, hood up. A phone glowed in his other hand. "Collins wants confirmation," the man muttered into the device. "The girl's here." The soldier, too. "Send the truck." Daniel moved fast. "Drop it!" The man spun, knife flashing in the dim light. He lunged, but Ranger was faster, launching up the steps, teeth snapping onto the man's arm. The knife clattered down the stairwell. The phone followed, shattering on stone. The man screamed, trying to wrench free. Daniel surged forward, slamming him against the wall, pinning him hard. "Who sent you?" The man's eyes burned with defiance. "Collins owns this block." "You can't stop him." Daniel shoved harder, voice like gravel. "Try me." Below, deputies thundered into the church. The sheriff shouted up the stairs. "We got him, Sergeant! Bring him down!" Together, Daniel and Ranger forced the man down the winding steps. The shepherd never released until the cuffs clicked shut around the man's wrists. When Daniel emerged into the sanctuary, Lila was waiting, her face pale but her eyes blazing. She threw her arms around Ranger first, then Daniel. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," Daniel said. The sheriff hauled the intruder upright. "Collins overplayed his hand. Between forged custody orders and this little stunt, a judge will eat him alive. I'll have warrants by morning." Father Miguel exhaled, relief softening his stern face. "Justice has long arms, even if it stumbles." Daniel gathered the bundle of letters again. "Justice isn't finished yet. Gabriel's alive. And if Collins is tied to the smuggling Gabriel uncovered, this goes deeper than a foreclosure scam." The sheriff nodded. "Then let's dig. I'll forward this to the feds. If her father's name is in their files, they'll find him faster than we can." Lila's voice trembled. You mean he might come home? Daniel crouched so his eyes were level with hers. I can't promise when. But yes, this letter, these clues, they mean he's alive and fighting for you. Just like we are, Ranger pressed against her side, steady as a pillar. Lila buried her face in his fur, tears soaking his coat. Mrs. Alvarez, who had slipped in quietly after the deputies, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Until her father returns, she won't be alone. Not with us, not with you. Sergeant Daniels swallowed hard. He hadn't expected this fight when he walked up a rain-swept porch the night before. But looking at Lila now, fragile but unbroken, clutching her mother's letter and leaning against the shepherd, he knew some battles weren't chosen. They were given. Home isn't walls and roofs, Daniel said softly. It's the people who fight to keep you safe. And you've got a home again, Lila. We'll build it together. The bells above settled into silence. Morning light poured through the stained glass, painting the girl's face in colours of hope. She whispered then, barely audible, but enough for everyone to hear. Daddy's not dead, and Mom's light is still here. Ranger's tail thumped once against the stone floor, a quiet drumbeat of loyalty, as if to say the battle wasn't over, but the war for her heart was already being won.